The night outside was perfectly still. Not a breeze nor a cloud in sight. The only life being the shrill chirping of crickets. Inside was nearly as still, the soft silence being punctuated by the faint gunshots from a computer, and the occasional yaps of excitement. Sat by the screen was a moderately tall Fusky. His fur had a brilliant azure blue coat, with a lighter sky blue fur covering his chest and running down to his feet, and appearing on his paws and face as well. There was a small upward shot in his tail, and his darker blue ears twitched while he intensely mashed the keyboard. "Hey, there's a man on the right," he suddenly exclaimed into the voice intercom. A more gruff and lower voice replied, "Skylar, where even are you?" I'm beside the, green building, the Fusky stuttered out, realizing that he wandered off course and couldn't properly identify his location. He winced lightly, tail flicking up, as a shotgun gunshot rang out from his right and he was eliminated from the game. Skylar shrugged off the loss and spoke to his teammate. "Hey, good luck, I've gotta go. I'm having Dylan over here soon." "Alright, I'll catch you later," his teammate affably replied. With a small nod, Skylar pressed his paw to the cold plastic of his computer monitor, powering it off and letting the small house once again fall into silence. Taking a moment to look down at his wrist, Skylar brushed away the little tufts of blue fur around his watch to check the time. 7:56. Dylan should be here soon. He swiveled his ears and tried to listen out really carefully, wondering if he could hear Dylan approaching. If maybe he could hear the soft footfalls of his paws on the grass outside. He could not. Chuckling to himself, he remembered that Fusky ears weren't made to be able to hear from about 4 miles away. He knew Dylan's could though. He could walk anywhere out in the open field around his house, and Dylan would know. There was a sharp rap at the door. Skylar, still listening carefully for any sounds, was startled and spun around in shock with a low yelp. There was a small giggle from outside. Standing up straight, he strode slowly towards the door. Tail high in anticipation, he paused to think for a second before grasping the cold handle. He knew exactly what to expect from his excitable friend. He thrusted the handle down and flung his light, flimsy front door wide open with a loud snap, trying to stay as far to the side of the doorway as possible. A flurry of white dived through the door as Dylan tried to friendly pounce his unsuspecting friend, only to realize that Skylar had already seen it coming. Completely off balance, Dylan crashed into the floor, performing a dizzying tumble or two before skidding to a halt just under a living room table with his tail between his legs. Dylan was rather interesting in appearance, especially when he was a fluffy mess sprawled under a table. His coat was probably the whitest you'd ever seen on a wolf. Some of his features, like his hair, the furry tips of his ears, and his tail, were a soft, gentle blue. On his wrists and his tail were jet black bands, scars, permanent ones, from a lightning strike at the age of 8. Dylan giggled and kneeled back up, only to bang his head on the underside of the table with a loud glass chime, and fall back to the ground with a soft whimper. Giggling a bit, Skylar crawled over to check if his clumsy friend was okay. Raising his friend's muzzle, he could see that Dylan had tears in his eyes, but was smiling and gave a feeble thumbs up to show that he was fine. Giving Dylan a warm and caring hug, Skylar whispered in his ear, "So, are you ready for the sleepover?" Wiping his eyes, Dylan gave a happy nod. "Of course I am!" Dylan peered outside to where he set his belongings down in order to pounce, and Skylar followed his gaze. Seeing Dylan get up and walk over to retrieve his items, he realized that Dylan didn't bring much at all. He noticed a little tablet and a small notebook with a pencil attached, and a bag of toiletries such as wolf-designed toothbrushes and whatnot. "Is that all you brought?" Skylar curiously inquired. Dylan again nodded. "Yeah. I mean, surely you need more than that, right?" Dylan tilted his head and let his ears flop a bit. I didn't think so." Just out of his glance, Dylan saw that the rickety top hinge of the front door had been forcibly ripped out of the wall. "Dear Lord, your door!" he exclaimed. Skylar twitched his ears in confusion, but quickly saw the damaged hinge too, realizing that he almost tore the door clean off the wall while opening it for Dylan. He placed his hand behind his head, embarrassed. "Don't worry, I'll fix it myself later. It was worth it for the prank." Dylan blushed at his friend, agreeing that the prank was pretty funny. He walked over and calmly placed his tablet and bag of stuff on the same table he hurt himself under, and kept a notepad and pencil in his paw. "What's that?" Skylar inquired. It looks pretty important. Starting to pace from side to side, tail dragging a bit, Dylan paused in silence to think of a response. Yeah. I mean, it's not that important. I mean, what is it? It's a little journal of mine, for writing stuff, Dylan said as he flopped down in one of the soft, single-seating couches. Skylar peered over. Oh, I see. Are you up to writing anything as of now? Dylan nodded back as he held out his grey-laced pencil and carefully flipped through the pages until he landed on the page he was looking for. Want to have a little look-see? Sure, I guess. Skylar let his fox hybrid instincts take control and pounced right next to Dylan, narrowly missing right in the middle of his lap. He slid down beside the smaller wolf until they were both sitting snugly in the small chair. On a small triangular notepad, Skylar could see a lot of writing, in a barely readable font, scribbled in quick and detached strokes. He focused harder on the paper. What seemed like a sketchy mess slowly started to transform, becoming more uniform here and there, indistinguishable, until he could read it like an elegantly flowing script. Dylan's handwriting never failed to impress him. In fact, not just Dylan, all wolves wrote like this. What does it say? Skylar asked, not bothering to try and read the whole page. What do you want me to do? Read the whole thing like a bedtime story? Replied Dylan with a giggle. I meant, what are you writing about, silly? Oh, you're after that. Dylan laughed and continued. Well, I'm writing about an adorable blue fusky with clouds on her shoulder. You could see a small red blush on Skylar's face. And a little white wolf who loves pouncing into stuff and cuddles, he added. Skylar, already getting the hint that was about the both of them, wanted to know a bit more. What's the main idea of the story? Romance? He giggled. Dylan laughed and gave his friend a little boop on his grey twitching nose, which only made him blush a bit more. I really don't know what this story's gonna be about, he went on as he took a gentle hold of his friend's paw, letting him feel the soft warmth of his triangular-shaped paw pads. Dylan moved Skylar's paw carefully and turned over 3 delicate pages. Skylar could see at the top of the page, scribbled in large, bold title letters, Meaningless. You're not writing about anything? I'll explain, but it might take a while. Skylar stretched his arms out, letting his fur ruffle a bit. We should go elsewhere, like get comfy for this. How about my bed, where you can get a nice feel for the night? Dylan's ears pricked up from the side of his head. Mate, are you sure about your bed? You really don't need to. You know I'd be more than happy to sleep on the floor. Skylar knew that Dylan was giving an honest answer. Having slept together with Dylan before, he knew that as a wolf who grew up alone, Dylan loved laying down and embracing a cool, solid surface for a good night's rest. It's no big deal, really. Besides, I wanted you there with me. I can't give you a warm cuddle if you're all the way down there. With a little blush, Dylan nodded in compliance and let Skylar hold him in his arms and carry him soundly to his bed, both tails wagging the brisk, affectionate fashion. Skylar laid Dylan down on the bed and sat by his pillow. There was a bit of shuffling and a little squeak from the right next to him. He turned around, only to realize that Dylan had already gotten all comfy and snuggled up in the sheets, and there was a little head poking out from under the covers. Looks like somebody loves it here, remarked Skylar as he slid under the blanket with Dylan and gave a long, loving cuddle. So, you want to tell me about your story now? Alright. Dylan let his playful friend cling to him and friendly nuzzle his side as he went on explaining his story. Some of my stories are just like this. They're just written, they have no meaning in them. As for the one I'm writing, well, you can argue that my thing's like a diary for both of us. But diaries have a purpose, to show events. This here, Dylan waved his notebook. This is just a wolf and a fusky being a wolf and a fusky. Skylar was already starting to sound sleepy. Well, why write then? Dylan paused for a moment. He'd never asked himself this before. If my writing means nothing, why do I write? What does writing mean to me? Dylan let the questions resonate in his head before grasping a clear answer. I write because I love writing, he stuttered out. Writing means a lot to me, seeing the characters flow together and losing myself in an environment I know I can create. When I'm all alone, sometimes my writing's the only thing I have. Dylan let out a gruff sigh and continued on. And as for meaning, well, maybe some things in this world just don't need meaning. A wise doe once told me to pursue what I love in life with my all, no matter what stands in between. So here I am, I guess, writing and writing. I don't mind that my stories don't have a storyline. How about you? What do you think of this? Dylan gently nudged a fluffy fusky laying down beside him. Skylar let out a low snore, signaling to Dylan that he was asleep. Looks like it really did work as a bedtime story. How absolutely adorable. With a gentle caressing head rub, Dylan leaned over and kissed Skylar gently on the muzzle. He could feel Skylar's right paw twitch under the blanket, and noticed that his cheeks were starting to flare pink amid the ruffled hair. "Wait, Skylar, you're awake?" Without hesitation, Skylar got up and kissed his friend back on his fluffy cheeks. "Of course, it's only like 8 and a bit." "Adorable sneaky little thing," teased Dylan, blushing hard and tail wagging. Both of them embraced each other in a warm, snuggly hug. It is about 11:30 now. Dylan and Skylar had just finished dueling in a few grueling rounds of chess on Skylar's computer, both of them relatively tired and quite ready to sleep. Dylan was, of course, the first to dive right into the bed, getting comfy and curled up in a matter of seconds. Skylar pounced on him, this time landing right in the middle of his tummy and causing Dylan to squeak in surprise. "That's so adorable," he chirped, causing Dylan to pull the cozy blanket over his face to hide another blush. Rolling over, Skylar went back to being ready for bed, but couldn't help but notice Dylan's faint blue triangular notepad on his bedside table. "Hey, Dylan, can I read your notepad?" "Yeah, just be careful." Taking delicate care, Skylar flipped through the many pages of his friend's notepad. He could tell that Dylan indeed did write a lot. The words in the paragraph he peered through just seemed to flow together, painting fascinating pictures in his mind. He realized something. The title Meaningless was a common trend, and it appeared at the top of a page more often than not. Passing more pages, he eventually settled on one of the stories crafted by Dylan. A story about a swan, a feral swan. The swan didn't do anything. Nothing happened to it in the story. It was just a beautiful swan. Skylar laid Dylan's book back on the table and turned to him. He looked fast asleep. To be fully sure, Skylar gave Dylan a little tickle with his warm and soft paws. No reaction. He really was out cold. He clung to Dylan's furry arm and rested his muzzle comfortably under Dylan's with an affectionate and fond purr. He thought about his friend for a minute. He has had other friends come over plenty of times before, most of the times bringing interesting activities such as party games and Nerf guns, and things that Skylar probably preferred not to mention to himself. However, Dylan, in comparison, bringing close to nothing most of the times, almost seemed a bit duller and more uninteresting than his other friends. And yet nothing felt missing. Skylar brushed these thoughts aside. He didn't care. He loved Dylan as a companion, and that was what mattered to him. With that thought in mind, he relaxed, and he too fell soundly asleep in a cuddle.